Welcome to my brief presentation on the Book of Learning and Forgetting by Frank Smith. Today I'll be discussing my review of the book, which will include a short summary, 5 big ideas I took away, my personal recommendation, 5 of the best quotes, and finally a set of questions that came to mind when I was reading this book. So let's get started. Smith mainly describes the different views of learning and forgetting throughout the book, which he defines as the classic and official view. He goes on to first discuss the classic view, which is the process of learning from people with whom we identify with. He uses clubs as an illustration, as he views clubs as communities of influential people which we hope to learn from. Smith also mentions the difference between short-term and long-term memory as he attempts to explain how learning works within our brains. In the next section, he discusses the official view, which is the idea that we can learn anything, but we must put in enough effort. Smith also briefly mentions the history behind the official view as well. Lastly, looking forward, Smith encourages us to liberate ourselves from the official view of learning and forgetting, as he discusses other topics like standardized testing. After reading the book, I took away 5 big points, which are as follows. Number 1, learning should happen naturally. We should not have to work towards learning. In Smith's mind, this is the classic view. The second point is that we learn from the company we keep and from the communities we are a part of. As Smith mentions, we are constantly learning new things, and they mainly come from the people we are surrounded by. Number 3, deep learning happens when we are engaged in meaningful activities. Learning should be purposeful and meaningful, and we should not get lost in pointless activities. Number 4, teachers should strive to create an environment where students can learn, rather than trying to ensure students are receiving all the content. And lastly, number 5, there is still hope for the education system and shifting the way learning and teaching is conducted. Although this book seems a bit negative at times, Smith definitely leaves us with some hope in the fact that teachers can change the world if we work hard enough. In terms of my personal recommendation of this book, I would definitely encourage others to take a read. This book helped change my perspective on learning and allowed me to see the importance in building those relationships with others. Additionally, my eyes were open to the importance of truly understanding the education system and learning new ways that we can effectively teach others. This first quote, which says, "Consider first the concern parents often have about the company their children keep. We know the enormous influence that friends have. If our children have friends who play hockey, we are not surprised when we begin to get requests for hockey equipment and for tickets to hockey games." This quote really stood out to me as it emphasizes the importance of relationships and surrounding ourselves with people we admire and respect. When reading this quote, I began to reflect on my own childhood and realized that I had been learning from those around me without even knowing it. The second quote is very important to me as it made me realize how much of our education system still focuses on the official view. This quote states, "The official view of learning has spread its tentacles so rapidly that it was soon unquestioned, taken for granted as the way the world has to be." No one has really questioned this theory, but it might be time that we start to. Schools are very focused on standardized testing, curriculum, and state standards, and sometimes we forget about building those relationships and creating an environment that allows students to learn effortlessly. This next quote, which says, "If the students are engaged in activities involving mathematics or science or engineering, and they don't look bored or confused, we know they are learning about mathematics, science, or engineering. There is nothing strange or mysterious about any of this. It is a classic common sense, but it can be no place in the indifferent technology of testing." This quote emphasizes the overuse of testing rather than using more informal assessments to observe how students are responding to content and activities. I believe teachers should be able to make a judgment call when deciding to use tests, considering right now, administrators push testing pretty heavily. This quote, which states, "But changing the relationships that teachers have with students can make a profound difference. In the history of education in the last century and a half has been one of continual change in personal relationships among teachers and students, until we have finished up with almost no individual relationships among them at all." This quote again emphasizes the importance of building relationships and how it can actually make a difference. Unfortunately, our current education system has seen a lack of individual relationships among teachers and students, which can be concerning. Smith draws attention to this and encourages us to make those connections in the classroom. This last quote really stood out to me as Smith's words are so powerful. He says, "How might teachers take charge and improve what goes on in schools? I have a simple answer. They must change the world." Smith, although he recognizes the struggle and improvements that are needed, he also leaves us with an encouraging note that teachers will be able to change the world. Lastly, as I finished the book, I had a few lingering questions, which are as follows. Number 1, is our world able to make this shift towards the classic view of learning? This is something I would definitely like to look into further. Number 2, why has the education system not considered these principles to better improve the learning experience? Number 3, what role does technology truly play in learning? As a student in the MIT program, I think this is important to explore further. Number 4, when will the world acknowledge the drawbacks the education system imposes on its students? I think this is interesting to see when there is a classic view and official view, why are we so focused on the official view? And number 5, why are relationship and community building not emphasized more in the current education system? I do think some teachers and classrooms do emphasize relationships, but I would like to see more teachers emphasizing those community building skills as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned a little something more about the Book of Learning and Forgetting by Frank Smith. This presentation was created by myself, Jamie Ronan, for MIT 512. Thank you.